All right, today we're diving into something really special, a thought experiment pulled from a sealed Imperial archive. It's, it's pretty chilling. It's all about an impossible arrival in the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy, an event so completely alien that it was basically erased from the history books. So let's unseal this file and see what's inside.
You know, this one line from the archive, it just sets the whole mood, doesn't it? Normally, when something shows up in the 40K universe, it's this violent, screaming mess that rips a hole in reality. But not this time. This was different. It didn't play by any of the rules. It was just quiet. A deep, unnatural quiet. I mean, just look at the difference here. On the left, you've got your standard warp incursion, total chaos, violence, reality getting shredded. But on the right, Superman's arrival is all about what didn't happen. No psychic scream, no demons whispering, no cosmic violence. It was a presence that registered as a complete and total absence of all the usual mayhem. And this, right here, is the absolute key. This wasn't some sensor glitch or somebody forgetting to file a report. The entire framework of the Imperium, their whole system for understanding threats, it just broke. They couldn't put him in a box. They couldn't label him. And if you can't be categorized in the Imperium, then for all official purposes, you just don't exist. So that brings us to our first big idea. The archive doesn't talk about Superman as a hero or a villain, or even really as a person. It talks about him as a fundamental error, a glitch in the system, a walking, talking bug in the code of this brutal, awful reality.
To really get why he's such a problem, you have to understand the galaxy he landed in. The 40K universe isn't a place where good is fighting evil. It's more like a wound that just won't heal. Every single faction, every army, is just desperately trying to bleed out a tiny bit slower than everyone else. The entire system is built just to manage a slow, grinding decline into nothing.
This quote just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly sums up the core philosophy. Human life isn't seen as precious. It's a resource. It's currency. You spend trillions of lives to buy one more day, one more hour against the darkness. At the end of the day, surviving is just a matter of cold, brutal math. And right there, that's the conflict that can never be solved. Into this galactic meat grinder drops a being whose entire moral compass is built on a concept that isn't just weird here, it's functionally impossible. The idea that a single life has value. So this leads to the big question, right? What happens when a universe that only understands war and conflict runs into a being of absolute power who just refuses to kill? His first meeting was with the orcs. According to the records, he took apart an entire Wa without causing a single death. He didn't fight them in a way they got. He disassembled their war machines, collapsed their walking fortresses, but he didn't blow anything up. And the orcs, a species that literally lives for a good fight, they were just confused. And that's really why he won. See, the orcs' power, their very tech, it works because they all believe it works. That's the Wa field. But Superman gave them nothing to build a story around. He wasn't a big, tough war boss or some tricky god. He was just an anomaly they couldn't wrap their heads around. So the planet was saved, but there were no celebrations. Instead, the Imperial Guard filed a distress report about some unknown thing. While you can bet the Adeptus Mechanicus showed up to investigate, and what they found horrified them. They scanned him and found this being of unbelievable power, with zero technology, no genetic modification, and no connection to the warp. He was a perfect, self-sufficient biological machine. And that was the label they slapped on him, their final damning verdict. In a universe where absolutely everything rusts, rots, corrupts, and decays, here was something that just is, a constant. For the Mechanicus, who worship a machine god and believe all flesh is weak and flawed, this was the ultimate heresy. A perfect organic being that needed no upgrades and no worship? That's an insult to their entire religion. Okay, so what about chaos? Surely the dark gods would love to get their hooks into a soul like this. But when their demons came to test him, something weird happened. The warp, which is literally fueled by emotion, found nothing to eat. It was like screaming into a perfectly silent, soundproof room. Here's why it didn't work. He wasn't fighting them off with faith, like a living saint does. He was resisting them with just simple, unbreakable clarity. You couldn't tempt him, you couldn't scare him, and you couldn't make him angry. He gave them no emotional handholds, no fuel for their fire. Chaos literally couldn't feed on him. so it just pulled back and marked him as something strange to be watched.
So, with every major power in the galaxy basically rejecting him, things enter a new and honestly a much more dangerous phase. What happens when a miracle shows up that nobody actually wants? The archive points out that the real danger wasn't what he did, but the effect he was having. On the planets he saved, this poison started to spread. Guardsmen started whispering, wondering if charging into machine gun fire was really the only way. People started thinking that maybe, just maybe, things could actually get better. He was introducing hope.
And that, of course, is when you hear the heavy boots of the Inquisition coming down the hall, because they understood the real threat. You can fight a Tyranid fleet, you can banish a demon, but an idea is so much more dangerous. Superman wasn't a physical threat anymore, he was a philosophical one. He was a living, breathing counter-narrative to the Imperium's core belief that there is no hope, there is only war.
This all leads us to the Imperium's final desperate move. If hope is the disease, how do you fight it? How do you quarantine an idea? The Inquisition's plan was, well, it was terrifyingly smart. They knew they couldn't kill him, so they decided not even try to fight him physically. No, their plan was to break him philosophically. They were going to weaponize the grim, awful truth of their galaxy against everything he stood for. So they did it. They brought him to the heart of it all, to Holy Terra itself. And they took him into the throne room and showed him the Emperor. Not the God King from the propaganda posters, but the reality. A 10,000-year-old psychic corpse, trapped in a state of eternal agony, whose slow, painful death is the only thing holding humanity together. This was it, the final test. The moment where his pure, simple idealism comes face to face with the terrible, paradoxical engine running at the absolute center of human survival. And this was their checkmate. They laid it all out for him. They told him, go ahead, fix this. Free the Emperor from his pain, end the sacrifice. But if he did, the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse that makes space travel possible, would wink out. The Imperium would shatter into 1,000,000 pieces. Trillions would die screaming in the dark, and chaos would win. To save humanity from its own cruelty, he would have to condemn it to immediate and total extinction. And for the first time, he hesitated. He couldn't win. It wasn't because he wasn't strong enough or fast enough. He couldn't win because winning, by his definition, was simply impossible here. To save this galaxy, he'd have to become a tyrant, just like the Emperor, making the same horrible choices. And so, he left. Not defeated, but rejected by a universe that literally cannot survive the hope he represents. And that's the last chilling line in the file. A final note classifying hope as a form of contamination. It's the ultimate proof that in the grim darkness of the far future, a real hero might just be the most dangerous thing in the entire universe.